Surprise, ladies and gentlemen, surprise. Joe from the Carolinas here. I have to tell you, it's been 90 days. A long 90 days. I did a 90 and back, as the case may be. I have to tell you, it's been 90 days. So we are getting some feedback from somewhere. Back, as the case may be. I have to tell you, it's been 90 days.
Does it sound like it's coming from my end?
It may be coming from your end. Feedback from somewhere. Actually,
Okay.
no, I got it. I cleared it. Hey, folks, how are you doing? Joe from the Carolinas here, helping you confront the paranormal with reason, logic, and common sense. Off to a little shaky start since we had 90 days of a live stream ban from YouTube on a gardening video with 21 views. But it is my great pleasure to return to the YouTube stream and the airwaves, spending this time with you, whether you're out there live in the chat room, how are you? Or if you're out there on the archive, how are you? So please do give us a thumbs up. And if you think people would be interested, share this video. Look who we have over here. We got Jason Rice, the Secret Space Program insider, and more, allegedly. Isn't this going to be an interesting experience for all of us? And I'm really looking forward to it. And Jason, I have to say that I just have to say I'm honored that you would be willing to come on a show from somebody like me, where I've been doing a lot of skeptic debunking kinds of things. So welcome to the Ab Paranormal Podcast, Jason Rice.
Hey, thank you, Joe. I appreciate you having me. And, hey, I feel honored to be here talking about this. And I think that your efforts in asking questions is what the truth movement is about. It's about asking those questions to seek, and so that we can find out exactly all the pieces. And by no means is it going to happen overnight. We didn't get here overnight, so we're not going to get out of it overnight. But I really appreciate you having me on your show and giving me an opportunity to talk for us to discuss the many wonderful topics that are going around these days. And so, hey, hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. And just for starters, Jason, just before this interview, did send me his DD 214. Jason, could you please tell folks what that is?
Absolutely. Upon exit from the military service, regardless of what branch you're in, you're issued a Form DD, Department of Defense, Form number 214, that lists out basically anything and everything that you have done or did or were certified in or trained in or awards given, rank attained, all the information that you need to know. It's a single piece of paper. It's probably one of the most important pieces of paper that you're given upon exit from the military.
Thank you. And so, folks, I know that we're all about show me the evidence. I always say that. Show me your evidence. Well, Jason Rice has showed me his evidence. Now, in order to protect his privacy, upon advisement from his family as well as his lawyers, I have agreed to not show his DD 214 on the screen with you right now. I'm sure that if in the future you need to look at these kinds of documents, there's probably going to be some way for Jason to just demonstrate that to people, but we're not going to take care of that on this show. But on my honor, I can tell you I've seen the documents and they are legit. Okay. So,
Yes.
Who is Jason Rice?
That's a great question. Jason Rice is an engineer who's worked very hard in multiple fields. I'm a family person, and up until memories started coming back, I thought that I was just your average everyday person going about his life, doing the things that people do. You have days where you've got aches and pains. You have high days, you have low days. You have days where you open your hands and look at the sky and ask, why me? I mean, from a standpoint of what I consider to be a run-of-the-mill normal person going about their normal daily lives. I have things that I like doing for hobbies. I have things that I am very committed to doing for my family. It was before the awakening and remembering process. I had lost some touch with my own spirituality. And while it didn't go away completely, this process and experience has certainly re-anchored a tremendous amount of that. So I've come out and gone public because I think that there are parts of the disclosure puzzle that I can contribute for. I'm certainly not trying to sell anybody on a new paradigm of what to or how to believe. I am not qualified to do that. Each person's journey is their own individual journey, and the only person that's qualified to tell you what you should and should not believe is you. And so that's not what I'm here for. I'm trying to help. I've got a whole bunch of my own questions. And so I'm a firm believer in the team effort and the co-creative, cooperative working. And so this is what I see as the best way for getting to the answers that we're all looking for.
And you know that we have kind of a bit of a history, if you will, in ufology in recent years of alleged whistleblowers that ain't got no whistles to blow.
Sure.
Yeah, and I've kind of, in many of the videos I've done and speaking with many other people on YouTube, I've come up with this process. If you call yourself sanctioned, you're ordered to disclose this information about these sort of classified projects, et cetera, then we should hold you to a higher criteria, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
now, are you sanctioned? Is an ordering body, person, alien, or group saying, Jason Rice, we want you to let the world know all about what your experiences were?
No. I can't be any more clear than that.
Okay. And then
Absolutely.
And then there's also some questions that we might as well just get out of the way right now, you know, because I'm
Sure.
a pretty blunt guy. What would you say to people that would say this guy Jason Rice is just a bunch of BS?
Well, I would say first off that I can certainly appreciate that viewpoint. Again, the questioning is not, I encourage differences. I encourage questioning because that's how we get to answers. Having not, if I had not gone through the memory recollection and the incredibly moving experiences that have happened as a result of that, hey, without having those, my skeptics radar would be very similar to many others. And what I can tell you is that we know that there are a lot of unanswered questions. We know that there are aspects of not only ours, but many other governments that are doing things and have done things outside of the public venue that we are not aware of. I mean, just look at the efforts on the Manhattan Project. Over 100,000 people were involved with that, but they didn't know what they were working on. But clearly we can see the results long term of what that meant for our entire society. So asking the questions, hey, I encourage that. I'm not here to ego stroke. That's not the purpose for me being here. I'm here to ask questions and seek answers. And I believe that we're better doing that together than we are individually.
Okay, good. Thank you. And the other thing I think that has in the communities over the past few years kind of rubbed people the wrong way is monetary interest or monetary gain. And my understanding, and I could be wrong, please correct me, is that you have a full-time job in a field where you basically don't need to be on YouTube. You don't need to be doing this.
That's correct. Part of my own spiritual growth was learning about the illusionary aspects of money and the traps that are commonly fallen into because of the need to seek out additional wealth. And having lost almost everything, from a physical standpoint, you realize, at least I did, that money is not happiness. And so I do have a profession that allows me to earn a living for myself and my family. And I keep things very simple for a reason, because the superficiality of stuff is just an illusion. And so I am not doing this to try and make money from YouTube clicks or from appearances. My main source of income is not, and I do not plan for it to be. In fact, one of my strongly held personal beliefs is that there are certain things that we as Americans, or even those in other countries, should do as a personal responsibility. It should be considered an honor to do it, and it should not be something that you turn into a career. And recounting experiences in the SSP falls into that category. Politics falls into that category.
Right.
There's a number of other industries that I feel very strongly about that. It's not meant to be a career. It's meant to, hey, we're supposed to be helping each other find answers.
And do you feel comfortable disclosing what your professional career is at this time?
No, simply because while I have stepped up and come into the public light, my clients and or employers, present, past, whatever, they did not. And so, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that would take to harassing clients that I'd had 15 years ago. And so the reality of it is that, no, I'm not comfortable with doing that. I'll be happy to privately share that information with certain people that I trust. But to put it out there publicly, no, I'm not comfortable with doing that. It wouldn't be fair to any of those people.
Totally understand. Okay, so to the Gaia episodes that you've done with Cosmic Disclosure, just to get the big stuff kind of, people want to hear what you have to say about these things because they're all important in terms of a credibility thing. Now you sending me this DD-214 is something that other whistleblowers that we've seen coming out of certain camps have not done, been unable to do.
That's correct.
And I know that you've done how many hours of hypnotic regression, and do you feel comfortable saying, was it by a licensed professional?
Georgina Cannon is a trusted individual in the field of hypnosis. She's been doing it, if I recall correctly, for more than 30 years. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you'll have to ask her about that. Okay. She has worked with any number of organizations and individuals and still continues to do that. You asked how long the hypnosis session was?
Actually, how many total sessions did you have?
We've only had one to date, okay. And it was a 3-hour session.
Okay, and was that observed by cameras, or was that just you and her?
It was with cameras.
Okay, so that was the clip that we saw in the first episode of Cosmic Disclosure when you were just kind of laying down with your eyes closed. That was the same 3-hour hypnosis session.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
On to the polygraph. So my team did some digging about the polygraph examiner and found that he was not currently a member of the Polygraph Association at the time. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you about the polygraph is, in looking at the editing of the show, it seemed like it was really short, and I would have loved to have seen completely unedited raw footage of that and the hypnotic regression, to be honest with you. But can you walk us through what really happened with the polygraph and how it really went down? Because there are some concerns from people that the polygraph was faked and it was just filmed for script and stage and, just for show, essentially. Can you maybe address that by giving us or disclosing some information?
Absolutely. I'm happy to. In fact, one of the first things I'd like to say is that The opportunity to go and have a polygraph conducted has been offered to every guest that has appeared on Cosmic Disclosure, and the ones that did not elect to do it refused to do it. And now the process of going through it, again, this gets back to the question of whether or not the interviews are scripted. I asked them some questions. I recognize that they're not going to tell me much because, I mean, it's a polygraph. So let's look at the person that is licensed, Thomas Hoff, who was a former LAPD detective, retired. He's been involved in law enforcement his entire career. He is a very interesting person to talk with. He is about as direct, straightforward, and to the point as anybody I've ever met. And getting down right to asking the questions. The process that we went through was I was introduced to Thomas and Brian, and then they explained what was going to happen. Hey, we're going to hook you up to this, this, and this. It's going to measure, the sweat and how much you're shaking if you are, and little pads under your feet to see if you move your feet. We're going to put a strap around your chest to see if your heart rate changes, your breathing rate changes. I mean, it's getting plugged in to a computer. Yeah, it's a test. And I'd never met them before that day. I'd never heard of their names before that day. I'd never had any contact with them before that day. They have had to polygraph a wide range of people, from civil domestic issues to prisoners. I mean, the full range. This happened to be if I remember correctly, the first time that they had ever had to polygraph someone coming out about the SSP. Okay. And so we had a chance to talk. None of Gaia was in the room for the open and frank discussion that I had with Thomas and Brian. And one of the questions that I had for them, because I'm not going to go into this situation without questions. I have questions too. So one of my first questions were, are you associated at all in any way, even peripherally, with any of the three-letter agencies? Absolutely not. And in fact, going back and doing further information searches on them, that has proven to be, as to the best of my ability, true. They asked me some questions about some of the training. They asked if I had ever been to Mars. And then he went on to describe the process of the polygraph. And then he sat me down in a chair and he went through and explained, hey, this is a direct lie stimulation test, DLST. And he said the purpose of it is to create a baseline of a non-truth by asking questions like, have you ever broken a law? And they told me, we want you, for these questions, we want you to deliberately not be honest, so that they can establish a baseline to compare the other questions to. These are the control questions that they use. And so they asked those questions. And of course, there was at one point I couldn't help but laugh because, I mean, the questions are pretty out there. And I think just about every single person on the planet has probably broken a law at some point in time. In fact, I think I remember reading recently about a study that said the average person breaks 7 laws every single day, whether they realize it or not. So they go through and they create the control questions. And then from those control questions, they'll ask a control, and then they'll ask one of the target questions. And they'll ask a control, and then a target question. And so they'll go through that process, and there's a dozen or so questions that they ask. And we did that entire process with no production staff in the room. They weren't even in the building. They left the building and went down the street to do something, get coffee, I don't know. And then after that first test was completed, they had the production staff come in, set up cameras to do the recording. Thomas had wanted Brian to be the person on the screen, on the TV. And from a standpoint of responsible control and responsible charge, this type of professional arrangement is very common across a wide range of industries. For instance, if you have a doctor that is overall in charge of his medical patients, he has nurses or even technicians or even orderlies that work under him, under his direct charge. And those are important legal terms: direct charge.
Gotcha.
And delegated responsibilities. And so the person with the license is ultimately in charge and responsible for the end product. And that is the role that Thomas Hoff has from the polygraph exam.
And that does help. And just if I could break in, because some folks in the chat room are making some sort of real-time comments. It's kind of live chat, right? And one of the people in the chat room said that the fact that you're connected with Gaia makes you very biased, makes him very biased against you, because he's really trying to be open-minded. Do you feel comfortable? You don't have any background in hypnosis, do you?
No, zero.
Have you ever read a book or seen one of those really cool videos of how to beat a lie detector test?
No.
Okay.
I'd never taken a lie detector test. I'd never done any research whatsoever on how do you fake it. The closest I ever came was watching Ocean's 11 when the guy put a tack under his foot.
Did you have a tack on your foot that day?
No. Okay. They have foot pads specifically for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Folks, I got to ask. And Jason's being a really good trooper about all this. So the Gaia connection. So I understand now where the problem that I had with the hypnosis was, this guy's not even, registered or accredited. And now what you're saying is they just didn't show that there were two guys there. One of them was much more experienced, that was sort of overseeing the whole thing. So Gaia, y'all might need to work on that, because it kind of looked a little weird down here on the farm. I'm just saying. Now, about Gaia has been a very interesting component of bringing out a lot of people that myself, and others would perceive to be liars, hoaxsters, fraudsters, and quite frankly, charlatans in the area of secret space program insiders and whistleblowers. Are you comfortable telling the audience whether you're under any form of a non-disclosure agreement with Gaia?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I got a little bit of a lag here, so I have no problem whatsoever. I am not under a non-disclosure agreement contract. I am not under contract with Gaia. The very first contact I ever had with Gaia was, I'm a firm believer in the synchronicities that have happened every single day, whether it's numbers lining up on your odometer, or thinking about something and then driving 2 miles down the road and then seeing that exact thing. Synchronicities for me have personal messages. One of the memory recalls that was incredibly emotional and moving and terrifying happened about 4 or 5 hours, it was hours, before the very first day Gaia had ever publicly announced the email address to contact them if you have a contribution to make to the SSP picture.
And where did you see that?
It was on the Gaia channel. It was on the Gaia channel.
Okay.
And so seeing that email to me was like, okay, I get it. All right. So that was when I contacted them. And at that time, they did not have a Patreon account. And so I was legitimately concerned about sending information about my experiences over an open channel. And so, I prayed and meditated on it, and then eventually came to the conclusion that indeed that was what I felt I needed to do. And I believed that going public at one time, not doing it by myself, by YouTube or through Facebook or any number of other social media platforms, was the best way to assure mine and my family's safety and security. Because the concept is that because I'm just some guy, an engineer that has a pretty normal life, and I don't come from a family that owns islands and countries, and so their ability to reach out and touch you does not matter whether you're a president of the United States or a Secretary of Defense or just some engineer going about his daily life. Mm-hmm. By coming forward, the thought is that by going public, if they were to reach out and try and take care of me, that would give credence to what I was trying to say. And so the rules that they play by are that they're not going to immediately do that, because it would obviously give immediate credence to what I'm trying to say, and they don't want that. And so right. I gauged and judged the best way to go about doing that was to go public as in one way or another as from a source or with a source that I felt would protect myself as well as my family the best way that I could think of. And again, getting that message that morning was for me, it was crossing the T and dotting the I.
So you got the message and from Gaia through email, or was it a voice call?
The email address that they listed, ready to tell the truth, contact Gaia at, and I forget what the email address was. And that was what I seen.
And then what happened? They called you in? They wanted to fly you down?
What happened is that I didn't hear anything back from them for about April to August, about 4 months. Humans are humans. Funny story. It is what it is. Yeah. Apparently, the email address that they had stuff going to was not being forwarded to the right location. Mm-hmm. So it was just going into a box and collecting for a time. And once they discovered that error, that human error, then I heard back from them. Hey, have you remembered anymore? What is it that you've remembered? And so I started a conversation with Gaia at that point of, okay, this is what I've remembered and recalled. And ended up talking to them on the phone, as well as continuing to keep in touch by email. They invited me to come out for a taping in November of 2017. And again, keep in mind, at that point, I had memories returning for just over a year. And so at that point, I was, hey, look, I'm still trying to remember, still trying to get a handle on this, still trying to keep my sanity and make sure that I'm a healthy and productive individual and go about my daily life. I've had dark nights of the soul, as well as incredibly high highs from a standpoint of joyful living, and being able to go and to contribute in the way that I can was what I had wanted to do. And so Gaia made that available in November, starting in November, and then it continued on into 2018.
Okay, thank you. And so just for folks out there in the chat room and out in the archive, we are having to remove some messages just because of YouTube's ridiculous algorithm that got me in this position of 90-day channel strike to live stream to begin with, because of certain keywords that are used. So it's nothing personal. We're just trying to protect the channel. So you're not getting a salary from Gaia?
That's correct.
Okay. And so your work, as far as I'm hearing, and I could be wrong, your work with Gaia at this point today is finished, unless they invite you back.
Unless they invite me back.
Okay.
So yeah, I am not under contract. In fact, I have continued to help to provide information as well as guidance on artwork that I'm not reimbursed for. And hey, I have a normal life with a family that I still got to maintain, and a profession in which I'm active in. And so, this is above and beyond, but, I'm
Yeah.
not getting paid, and I'm okay with that. That's my providing service to it. And
Yeah.
why I am also happy to share any of the information that I can with other people, because we are much better at solving this giant puzzle working as a team than we are as doing it individually.
Provided that we can trust each other, I completely agree with
Right.
you. So speaking of trust, and by the way, for all of you just joining us, Joe from the Carolinas here at Paranormal Podcast. We're meeting with one of the latest secret space program insiders, I guess you could say. Experiencer. There we go. That's even better. Experiencer Jason Rice. And he has provided his DD 214 military paperwork. I have that in my possession now. I'm looking at it right now, but we're not releasing that publicly to protect his privacy. And so I agreed to that. But I'm sure at some point in the future, Jason's going to be able to have some means so that he can provide that credibility. So I don't have to take up time on shows doing that. But I really do appreciate that, because I know that that's a huge component of credibility. Like, we know who you are. And I'll also tell you, and I hope this doesn't come across as creepy in any way, shape, or form. We do a lot of different investigations and record checks on many different topics in the paranormal. So ufology, secret space, we can go anywhere into paranormal stuff too. Even looking at old time lore. And so I'll just tell you, one of my researchers is going to be doing some records checks on you with the military, all legal, all above board. And whatever we get back, I'll get in touch with you before any of that I put in a video or we do a live stream or something, just to protect your privacy. Okay.
Sure. I'm interested in seeing what it is they have to say. Absolutely. I've done my own FOIA request with the U.S. Army, and the hoops that they make you jump through to get your own records are it's meant to keep people from getting it, and I can understand and appreciate that. Not just anybody can go and get your records, but to get your own records, they certainly have a very high standard hurdle to make it over. But yeah, hey, go for it.
Cool.
I'm interested in seeing what it is they have to say.
Yeah, be glad to share. Changing topics a little bit, back to the Gaia thing. What's going on as far as any connections and thoughts about Corey Good, the insider, and David Wilcock? What would you say your perception is of those characters, and also do you have any connections with them, or Emery Smith, the E.T.
Sure.
Butcher?
Sure. These are questions that I've seen and heard and have been asked. I have met Corey and David on 2 occasions. The first occasion, I thanked them for what they're doing and their efforts. The second occasion, they don't know me. So I mean, when I could start talking to them like I know them, no, that's not me. So I did a lot of listening, and I had a chance to see them film an episode or 2 of Cosmic Disclosure. I had never met them before that time. I met Emery on the very first day he was filming with Cosmic Disclosure. It happened to be at the same time that I was there as well. I can tell you that my information from my experiences was not shared with them, and there was very specific reasons for that. Again, to protect my own privacy. But the result being that they don't know me. They don't know anything about my past. They don't know anything about my experiences or my involvement in the SSP, which, from a compartmentalization standpoint, it works. Mm-hmm. Compartmentalization works. And there's a reason why they continue using that concept. Now, from what I feel and think has been going on, uh, I've been privy to the same information that everybody else has. And there's stuff that's come out that's been published and it's been talked about. I will tell you this, and I leave it up to everybody individually to make their own decisions. When I was there for filming in February, the trademark application was made within 2 weeks of my being there, which means that talking to the attorney, getting things arranged, getting all the wording right, getting the application put together and filed and submitted to the U.S. Patent and Trade Office happened all within a 10-day period. And without having any access to my information or what it is that I am testifying about. That happened in early March. And to me, that says a lot by what is not said.
Indeed. How much of Emery Smith and Corey Good's stories have you been exposed to total?
I have been exposed to some of it. I have not been exposed to all of it. Another one of the things that I have wanted to make sure that I, from an integrity standpoint, because, the human psyche can be affected by information that you read or see or watch. And so I wanted to make sure for my own edification, and so that I can look in the mirror every single day and say that, yes, I know for sure that the information that's coming through, the memories that I'm having come back are not from data mining. I never have been a member or been on Project Avalon to sign up and research any of their information.
What about other forums?
No other forums, zero. Again, that was on purpose because I didn't want, number one, I wanted to be able to look you in the eye and say, no, I have not done that. And to rest easy at night knowing that I'm not lying.
And what about prior exposure just over the course of your whole life, maybe like before, during, as well as after these experiences? And I like that you call yourself an experiencer. I really appreciate that you clarified that.
Sure. SSP veteran or experiencer. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's an important distinction. What about prior exposure over the course of your life? Interest in ufology, interest in paranormal topics, learned a lot about abductions, aliens, technologies, yay, nay, maybe a little bit?
Sure. No, it's been something that has been of interest to me. In fact, part of the awakening process was that I kept going back to Antarctica, and just as part of my own, hey, this is what I'm doing for my free time when I had it, is I had an interest in the goings on of Antarctica. And I believe that the reason for that had to do with, something up here was trying to kick some things loose and say, hey, there's a reason why. And once I got into getting the full memory recall, I shouldn't say full, getting more memory recall, the reasons became clearer why I was being moved or directed or guided by God and my higher self in that direction. And it was because of the need to release the energies and the negativity associated with the things that I had participated in. And so to clear those things. And it helped. It definitely helped. What I found incredibly amazing was that when the memories really started coming back, I would be looking at something completely unrelated to anything ufology at all. For instance, I'd be looking at, kitchen tables, and somehow or some way it would be something that would come up that would lead me to something else, that would lead me to something else, that would lead me to something else. And then it would be like, okay, then it would have an aha moment. And just the path, the synchronicities, and watching for them. It's like trying to hear a whisper at a rock concert. It's really hard to do unless you can clear out all of the personal noise and to clear out the energies that you have accumulated, to open yourself to, okay, how do I cleanse and work on me? What can I do to make myself more service to others? What can I do to, from me personally? And so it's been a journey.
And
Absolutely.
you're still on it. Apparently, you're still on.
Will
the
never end.
Yeah.
Life is a journey.
There's a couple other questions. Do you know anything about jump rooms?
I have never had any experience with jump rooms
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to scroll down these. These are kind of more rapid fire questions.
that I recall at this time. And I would like to say that,
please,
by my estimates, that my memories have only accounted for about 40%.
Okay, and how do we know 40%? I'm just going to be the skeptic, right? How do we know 40% as opposed to 70%? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And all I can tell you is that that's based on my own guess,
okay,
for a lack of a better way of putting it.
I appreciate your forthrightness with that. I think
Sure.
I think that's cool. You were in the military. And what age did you go into the military?
I went into the reserves at the age. I'm sorry?
The reserves. Go ahead.
The reserves, the U.S. Army Reserves. I was contracted because of my ROTC scholarship. One of the small print that comes with that award of the scholarship is that you are automatically, guess what? You're signed up for the reserves. And so that happened the first week that I was enrolled as a freshman in college.
Okay. And we're kind of getting a little bit out of order from a sequential interview, but it is what it is. And folks, if you like this sort of thing, please do reach on down there and hit that subscribe button and share this video. What was your MOS when you were in the military?
The MOS that I was in was 21 Bravo, combat engineer.
Okay, thank you.
In the U.S. Army, that is. The IDARF has a very different setup and establishment.
IDARF, and tell people what IDARF is.
The Interplanetary Defense and Reaction Forces.
Okay.
And I mean, we can get into that if you like. We can come back to that later.
Let's circle back to that, because I'm just scrolling through. I'm still kind of trying to figure out if there's anybody else that has questions on credibility. I have a few more.
Sure.
And just for full disclosure, you and I spoke to each other privately over Skype yesterday.
That's correct.
For a couple 3 hours, just kind of getting to know each other.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. And there were some private things discussed that we're not obviously going to be putting out there. But Jason just kind of wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be just a total, you know what, to him. And I would never do that. But hey, somebody that doesn't know you. So
right.
Anyway,
and that's part of the getting to know each other process. And I would like to say that some of the things that that I don't want to talk about has more to do with issues of free will and not deciding for somebody else by naming names, issues of hopium or false hope based on some of the information that I have. They're very, very much tied into free will questions, not trying to withhold information from you. So that kind of information is what I think Joe is referring to from a standpoint of not talking about.
Yeah. And also to protect your privacy, because as I understand it, you've had some threats.
I have.
So already, and so it regardless of whether people believe the story, don't believe the story, or halfway in between, there are some crazy people out there that do crazy things, regardless of, the external or objective truth. We have a question in about what is your opinion of Corey Good's stories about the blue avions?
My opinion of that, I would say that, he is entitled to feel and believe whatever it is that he wants to. My experiences in the SSP, while there have been some congruency between training and that kind of thing you would expect. I mean, you have someone that goes to basic training in one part of the country is going to be trained the same way as another recruit in another part of the country. The U.S. government spends tens of millions of dollars on assuring training consistency because they want to make sure everybody's trained the same way. My experiences in the SSP have been greatly different than what I understand his have been, as well as the post SSP time period in which I have not had any recalled collection of interactions with aliens or blue spheres. I have heard from a number of sources about experiences with blue spheres. There's definitely a question there. There's definitely okay, what is that? And so, as a scientist myself, I can appreciate the fact that there are some unknowns associated with that.
Okay. Some more questions, and moderators, we're getting kind of quick on the chat here. I'm having a hard time keeping up. Mods, if you could put your questions in all caps and at me, so my name's highlighted up, I'll greatly appreciate that. And if people throw in super chats, we'll go ahead and read those questions as well. How are you doing, Jason? Do you need a break, or are you doing good?
Doing great.
Okay.
Doing great here.
I'm doing. Yeah, me too. I'm doing good too. So, anyways, folks, I really do want to say that I appreciate that Mr. Rice is willing to come on different channels of just average folks out here. I know that you had made an appearance on CW Chanter's channel last night. Bravo. Well done to you and him. And of course you're here now.
It was my honor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really appreciate that you're willing to be open. And I also appreciate that you are trying to become a part of this community. That being said, it doesn't mean that I believe everything that you're going to say.
Sure.
Right.
And if we're being honest, there are testimonies out there that do not 100% resonate with me as well. And, that's the personal journey. And who am I to say what should and should not resonate with somebody?
Right. I've got some cap questions for you. Before we do get into these other questions, though, I wanted to just run by, and these might be a little personal, so if they're too personal, just say pass.
Okay.
Okay. Have you ever had a hallucination?
A hallucination.
So have you ever heard voices that weren't?
Okay.
Yeah.
Detached voices speaking to me? No.
Okay.
I have not.
Do you have any? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that since I first started remembering, and very shortly after my communications with Gaia, of course, I popped up on the radar of certain agencies, and I can tell you that I am fairly certain that I've been watched, and based on seeing things that were there one moment and not the next. And I've never had any issues with seeing things. I know that I'm not imagining things. So as far as hallucinations go, hearing voices, no, I haven't had any of that experience.
Okay. And have you ever been an inpatient in a psychiatric facility? I hate having to ask that, but people were asking me to,
Sure. No, I have not.
Never been involuntarily committed?
I've never been voluntarily or involuntarily committed.
Okay. Do you have any kind of legal history that would be perhaps an issue from a credibility standpoint?
No. I went through some hard times as a result of the housing crisis in 2008. Most of my business was tied up with construction, and when construction dries up. So, of course, there were a lot of people affected during that time.
Yeah.
But, you pick up, tighten your belt and put your shoes on, and you keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah. You get her done.
Yep.
What about any exposure to toxic substances?
That's a good question. No, not that I'm aware of without having the correct and proper personal protective equipment.
Okay. Any episodes of missing time?
I have had a section of missing time in 2014 in which I woke up in my bed and could not remember what had happened the night before, and that was the first time to my recollection that that's happened.
Okay. Just as a side note, as part of your normal job, do you do a lot of like web conferencing?
No.
Okay.
No, I do not.
Okay, you do good at it. You're very good at it. Let's see here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Being around crowds and around a lot of people, or presenting information. Now, I've had to work past being around crowds, and I still don't like them. But as far as making presentations in person, that's something that I've had to do as part and parcel of my professional work.
Gotcha. Officers, candidate, school location.
My officer's basic course, because I did not go through the OCS route, since OCS is typically for someone that is a Mustang that's already been enlisted, that's becoming an officer. That's one route, and the second route is to go through directly into officer's basic course, and mine was done at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri.
Okay. All right, we're continuing to scroll, and David Buckwalter wanted to know, have you been age regressed?
I did go through that as part of my what we called career return in IDARF, commonly known as the 20 and back. And I'd like to just say that a couple more times: 20 and back, 20 and back, 20 and back.
I'm gonna say 20 and back.
Yes.
Okay. So age regression, in your experiences, age regression is a part of the 20 and back. It's required.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question for you on that.
Sure.
What is it like to have a physical adult brain in a child-sized body?
Well,
is that how it works, or
the maturity level that you attain before the time in age regression can't completely be blocked and sectioned off, because that's essentially what they do, is they try and section it off as much as they can. There are parts and aspects of the personality that can't be accounted for as far as sectioning off. As a 13-year-old that's dedicated and devoted and driven to obtaining a career, and suddenly overnight being wildly interested in the military, as well as not commonly being interested in things that are typical among my peers, it is challenging. But not knowing any different, I thought at that time that, gosh, I'm just applying logic. And to hear people tell me commonly at that age, I regularly heard, you're beyond your years. And of course, it didn't mean anything to me. I was just thinking, okay, whatever, I'm just applying logic. And so looking back, it's a very different picture on what happened in living as a 13-year-old, in which I'd had these experiences that had been sectioned and closed off. And, I'll be honest, I have more of my memories from my IDARF experience than I do from that first experience. Up until the time that I was on board a ship, that's about where the doors are closed. And I have not progressed past that as far as memory recollection. And when it first came, I started having the awakening. You go through the 5 or 7, depending on which scale you look at, stages of grief. And the first one is anger. And of course, I was angry and I wanted, demanding, God, why? Tell me, what are all the answers I need to have all these questions answered?
Mm-hmm.
Well, careful what you wish for. The more things that I started remembering is like, okay, wait, time out. I don't want to remember all of this. And so the process, because it's terrifying and scary, and
You were flooded.
Yeah, some of it was flooding, and I trust that process with 100% faith that the memories that come back, and the ones that have come back, and the ones that will continue to show up from time to time, do so at the time that they're meant to. I am firmly believe that that is in ultimately my best interest.
Okay. Now, there's a question here. Is there anything about your credentials that make you a scientist?
Sure. I can appreciate that question. Some people may think that term is thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
Without getting into too much information about my current profession and the things that I'm doing, I can say that as an engineer evaluating mathematically, structural science, evaluating buildings and construction from a standpoint of, okay, how do you go about designing something using reinforced concrete or structural steel and doing all the math involved with it. It's not uncommon when you're trying to do a calculation by hand for the strength of a beam to have 14 and 15 pages of written calculations. Thank God for software, because that takes a lot of that 15 pages for one beam. So, having software makes it a lot easier and convenient to go about doing those calculations. But that is how I consider myself to be a scientist, because of the application of, centuries of math and applying it towards, construction or engineering science, and actually using the math to determine, okay, how thick does that member need to be? How large a diameter does that column need to be? How much steel needs to go into it based on math and codes and laws and regulations? But it all boils down to math.
Great. Good answer. I appreciate that. So your background wouldn't give you any qualifications to have anything professional to do with bacteria or viruses or anything like that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Nothing to do with that. Mine's all been engineering science and design. From
fluid dynamics and stuff.
Fluid dynamics, electricity, civil engineering, structural. During my work at Kennedy Space Center, I was doing computational fluid dynamics and flow-induced stress calculations for fluids that flow through a corrugated pipe, convoluted pipe. And as it flows through it, it creates vibrations and sets up harmonics because of the convolutes. The fluid flows differently at the edges than it does at the center. I've been incredibly blessed that I've been able to practice and do a wide range of things in the engineering field.
When did you work at the Kennedy Space Center?
During my sophomore and senior year in college, I worked at Kennedy Space Center. During my sophomore year, I worked for a contractor on the Air Force side, and we did everything related to buildings and facilities. That experience was also part of the desensitization training. That excuse got me out there.
Yeah.
But part of the reason I was there was because of the need to put me through this additional SSP desensitization training process, because it doesn't happen overnight. The fight or flight instinct when you see something like an extraterrestrial or an even is overpowering. And so you have to work through that. You can't flood that experience and expect to be able to think logically.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sophomore year, while I was employed out there for a contractor, that was the first part of it. And then my junior year, I was at Fort Bragg for training. And then in my senior year, I worked again out at Kennedy Space Center for what was McDonnell Douglas. In the same year, they were bought out by Boeing. And so I worked on the NASA side while I was employed with McDonnell Douglas.
Okay. And we have more people joining us, quite a few actually. So welcome, Joe from the Carolinas here. We're interviewing Jason Rice. He's a secret space program experiencer / SSP veteran. According to his own report, I do have in my possession his DD-214 for the United States Army. He sent me an image of his Armed Forces of the United States, looks like identification card over here. So we will we will keep all that confidential per his request, but I've got them. Now,
everybody.
Hey, everybody. Do you happen to have any like badges or insignia or paperwork about your work at NASA?
Of course. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I cannot find my badge from the Johnson Controls days, working on the Air Force side of things. But I do have my original badge from working with McDonnell Douglas. In fact, the question of vetting has come up quite a bit. And my past was looked into 12 Ways from Sunday by Gaia. And
was it really?
It was. I don't know for sure, but based on the information and questions that I've gotten, I'm fairly certain they did a background investigation on me. I did provide them with all 14 pages of my curriculum vitae, in which they were able to verify a number of information points on my CV, as well as a copy of my KSC badge, as well as my DD-214, as well as all 3 inches of my U.S. Army military file. So there's a lot of information that's been provided, and I am looking forward to a time in which that information will be available to more people. But as you mentioned a few minutes ago, Joe, the concern is safety and security of myself and my family.
Yep. And especially with some of the characters that we're dealing with,
yes.
As you know, I mean, there's all kinds of gang stalking surrounding this whole SSP TM issue. So not even just with the experiences that you're talking about, which gosh only knows what the alphabet soup agencies want with you.
Yes.
We got community issues.
Yes. And we got to clean up the yard before we start looking at the neighbors.
Yeah. And maybe unless there's any other questions about, okay, this is a good question. I'm trying to finish up credibility and then kind of move into community, because that seems to me, and I think we, kind of reverberate well when we were talking yesterday, that right now might not be the time to go into all the details of what's going on with your memory recall, though we might get into it.
I absolutely agree that the issue that's bigger than any one person or experience or testimony is the question of trademarking and trying to control who can and can't, what is and isn't appropriate. That I think is far more important than any one person. And hey, my story is still going to be here. My testimony is not going anywhere. My experiences are going to remain after all of this is finished. And this is far more important than any of that.
Okay. So maybe part of this credibility thing, Jason, is just really the community getting to know you, and because you want to be a part of the community. And I think that, heck, I don't think that any of us out here have gone through these kinds of questions to know whether, we could be trusted or not. So I really do appreciate your courage and in being able to kind of go through this.
Absolutely.
The question is, have you made any book deals?
No.
Neither have I. Seminars?
No comics, no book deals, no movie deals, no.
Okay. Do you know about Tony Rodriguez and Ileana and Kevin Trimmel?
In fact, I've had the blessing of being able to talk to Tony on a number of occasions, and he and I are actually working to do some cooperative interviews together. And in fact, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I know that he is interested in doing some interviews together with me, and in fact, to try and talk about all these pieces, because one of the fascinating pieces of information that
Do we have a lockup? I think we had a
getting a
lockup.
slow connection.
Yep, we had a lockup. One of the
Okay.
most important pieces about working with Tony that you would like to do, you were saying?
Oh, yes, is being able to work together and connect some dots. And one of the blessings I've been able to have from talking to him is that he has indicated some of the civilizations that he experienced were also similarly technologically advanced to the ones that I had. And what I mean by that is they were either just pre-industrial or right at the cusp of industrial, which seems to be some of the target requirements for the civilizations that are being contacted outside of our system. And so had I never talked to him and gotten that data point and made that connection, I never would have had that contribution to the puzzle. And so being able to work with these other experiencers and SSP vets, I think, is crucial, and a tremendous opportunity missed by not doing so.
Yeah, by hoarding the knowledge, we don't really help anybody.
That's not disclosure. That's not truth seeking, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion.
No, I agree with you. Covert military civilizations, how much does Jason really know?
Covert military civilizations?
Yeah.
The experience that I've had with covert military civilizations has been through the Mars German breakaway civilization. And the officers, both fellow and above, that I've worked with and had experiences with, you're going to have a wide range of personalities, just like you would see in everyday life here on Earth. And you're going to have, everybody has their own agendas and their own motivations and their own egos. They're there. They are out there. As far as I'm concerned, and my own experiences, it has shown me that it's not a question of them being there. It's just, where are they? They are there. They're definitely there. And my own experience and information indicates that they had integrated themselves and worldwide into every industry imaginable, from research and development at the universities to research hospitals to law schools to government to Department of Defense contractors to agricultural businesses to the entire ag business, which is, I only have to think about one company to think how many people are involved.
You mean Monsanto?
Monsanto, yes.
I call them Monsanto because they do.
Yes, the modification of organisms.
Yeah.
It has all been part of a long-term plan, and I was able to see it sped up because they were able to bypass a lot of the barriers and speed bumps that have occurred here on Earth by these false flag invasions. Okay. They bypassed the whole, how do we get to one world government? They bypassed the whole, how do we get to one world financial currency? They skipped all that, cut it down from 1,000, 1,500 years down to 10 years or less.
And I'm sorry we're jumping around, because I really would like to unpack all of your answers, sure, even more. I hope you'd be willing to do this again, because I'm having a blast. How about you?
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. It's a matter of asking questions, and if I don't know, I'll tell you.
Have you had any interactions with anybody at the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences?
Oh, good question. No, I haven't.
Okay.
None, zero.
Do you have any thoughts about the TTSA?
My jury's still out on that. There's
Yeah.
been some, I think Mr. Dolan hit it right on the head last night. There's been some major blunders about what they've done and how they've done it. But is it possible that it's a great potential segue into getting technology out there? Of course, it has that potential. Is it sponsored by those that want disclosure from any of the three-letter agencies? That's possible too. I think time's going to tell what really becomes of To the Stars Academy. We'll wait and see. I'm of the mind that the whole financial debt slavery system, the illusion that that is, and being able to work and do things that you really love doing without having a financial need or desire mixed into it is ultimately what I'd love to see for our civilization to attain, because there's no need for that. But you look at the Native American culture, the 30 million plus individual souls that were here in North America before the Europeans got here, they didn't have any money. They didn't need it. They didn't use it. Financial
Right.
system, what's that?
Exactly.
And they, they seem to survive and thrive and live and joyfully pretty well for a long time without any need for money at all. And so, the many control mechanisms that are inherent to a financial system, in my opinion, is the things that we need to really grapple with and overcome.
And
That's my opinion.
I mean, it's interesting, just kind of riffing off you on that, because the same process we can apply to communities of any size, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
people trying
Yeah.
to divide communities. Well, what is the function of that? Oh, well, they're dividing a community, because when we divide a financial system or a community system or even a belief system, we have control,
Yeah.
Let me see here. Just following up with some of the other questions. Do you ever have any interactions with a smart glass pad?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
The software that we used in IDARF for accessing the hardware and software that we use for accessing databases, a lot of it was through the nanite enhancements, our combat computers. We were sectioned off from a lot of information based on our individual need to know. Working later in my career in either division headquarters or battalion headquarters, you get more information that's pertinent to what you're doing. But if you're a ground pounder that is a team leader or a rifleman equivalent, then you're not going to have access to, okay, here's why they've set up, get this, 12 different groups to rule this planet. So, that's the information I had not experienced any glass pad.
Okay. And what about food replicators?
Food replicators, yes, we did.
Okay. What can you tell us about those?
Sure. My first experience with a replicator was in what they called the Fort Indiantown Gap, the underground cave facility. I was told where the cafeteria was and not given any other instructions. And so my first time walking into the food line, I saw what looked to be, stainless steel warmers that were empty. And I'm looking around, okay, I smell food, but I don't see anything. They don't tell you anything there on purpose because they want to observe you under stress and pressure. And so that's part of their process, is to mess with you psychologically. And you're always under surveillance during the training time, 100% of the time. And so my first experience with a replicator was, okay, there's this strange warming table. That's what it looked like. And it had these little black squares on the top. That's it. No food, no clinking, no steam. And I walked into the cafeteria on my first day and looked around. There's several other soldiers sitting in there. And they must have known that the questioning look on my face was, okay, what next? What do I do? And one of the guys at a table said, push the black button. That was all I said. I'm like, okay, I didn't want to appear like I had no clue what he was talking about. I had no clue what he was talking about. So I pushed the button, and appearing in front of me out of what seemed to be nothing was a plate of butter. at that particular location. And
And how old were you then?
I was 24 at that
Okay.
time.
Do you remember
And
what color you were wearing?
what color I was wearing? I was wearing a camouflage, my new uniform that had been given to me the night before.
Okay.
My in processing.
Was that an IDARF uniform?
It was.
Okay. What is their camouflage pattern like? I collect camouflage.
Sure. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of a letdown, but you know, their camouflage pattern, the uniform technology that's used in IDARF is tied up in the ballistic resistance, the heat and thermal cooling and heating properties, the layers of the material itself. It's a very standard, at least it was then, a very standard digicam pattern.
Okay.
The science for blending in comes from another component, which is a field that's used to phase in and out of the current location so that it appears you disappear, but you're phasing and cycling in and out.
Gotcha.
The uniform material itself is a layered material, and the material is strong enough that it has a ballistic resistance all itself, by itself. It's also a triboelectric, which is an electrical generating as well as a biofeedback system, all built in one. It's a lot more form-fitting than any of the other uniforms that you would think of from a military or ground service, any of the ground forces. It incorporated a lot of additional technology applicant spots. I mean, there were placeholders for med kits. There were placeholders for combat computers. There were
plug and play kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. During the garrison duty, you didn't use any of those, so those were just empty pockets.
Do you remember you were telling me back in that cafeteria, you were wearing that camouflage uniform and kind of surprised at what the heck's going on? Do you remember like where the bathrooms were?
The bathrooms were off of the main hallway from the cafeteria. The cafeteria, and in fact, I'm looking forward to being able to get the floor plan layouts that I've been able to put together out as well at some point. But there's a main hallway that cuts through this floor that we were stationed and staying on. That was our quarters. It had our cafeteria. It had a meeting hall. It had lounge areas. It had all the rooms and quarters for the officers that were there. And along the main hallway included bathrooms.
Okay.
So just outside the cafeteria were bathrooms.
Do you know about how many stalls or commodes were in the bathroom?
There were 3 in each, 3 male and 3 female.
Oh, so there were females involved in the program too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that must
from
have been
many countries.
That must have been very interesting.
It was.
Many countries, many men and women working together. How did you handle the language problem?
The language difference was that anybody that was there spoke English. So that seemed to be the common denominator. There were people that had other languages that spoke, German or French or Spanish or whatever country of origin that they came from. But English seemed to be a common denominator, even among the Antarctic Germans.
Okay. And so in facilities on Earth that you were a part of, that you recall, every being that was in those facilities was human, or maybe not.
No, not all of the people there. The beings that were there were human.
Okay.
Part of what's called the entrance exams when you're first brought into the facility is that they pass you through a heavy field that's commonly found on starships. Genetically, some people react to that and go psychotic. And so at that time, they hadn't worked out a workaround for it. And so their answer to that was the first part of what they call the entrance exam. And that was to pass you unknowingly through a heavy field of the same type of tachyon radiation to see if you went psychotic. And if you did, of course, that's why the captain that I was with was armed. They worked out a system later in which it didn't involve, ending a life. But the second part of the entrance exam was direct exposure to an alien being, a gray, and to see if the fight or flight training, desensitization training, had held up. And so those are the two parts of the entrance exam.
Was that at Johnson Flight Center in Florida, where that desensitization training occurred, or was this a different type?
The desensitization training occurred while I was employed at Johnson Controls.
Johnson Controls.
Mm-hmm. And also while I was at McDonnell Douglas at Kennedy Space Center.
Okay.
Going through the field and the exposure to a gray to see if the desensitization training held up, that occurred underground.
Okay. And where was that again? You said it was I forget where you said.
It was an Army Research Center in North Carolina. I'm not going to get this.
Yeah, no, we don't have to get into too many specifics, because one thing that we had talked about yesterday was not getting into specifics about where exactly the locations were, or exactly the specific features. You'd probably say it easier than I would of the weapons, because it could be harmful to your safety, quite frankly.
Sure. The other thing is that some of the weapons that I encountered are pretty unique in that they are a reapplication of some of the science and technology that we have today. And one of the things I'm not interested in doing is providing a better way for somebody to hurt somebody else. And so some of that technologies I'm just not going to get into.
Okay. No, fair enough. No problems there. About how many different covert space programs are there that you've been able to recall and interacted with and all that stuff? I mean, is it just IDARF, or, I know there's also this one called Dark Fleet. I know that. How many of them are there that are separate private little guys?
Well, I suspect that the term Dark Fleet is referring to IDARF.
Okay.
As a generic term for IDARF. Because the Antarctic and Mars Germans had 12 carrier groups when they made the deal to lease out, if you will, 10 of them for border patrol, and which that was what we were doing. Mm-hmm. It turned out it was a border expansion, but those fleets are what I believe are referred to as Dark Fleet, which is also what Tony was involved with. Mm-hmm. To answer your question about other programs and projects, the IDARF program was completely different, separate, and sectioned off from any of the other Earth SSP programs.
Why is that?
Compartmentalization. If you don't have a need to know, it gets into the whole game that they have set up of, okay, I know the secret, you don't, and you don't have a need to know, so you're not going to find out. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many programs are there? There's a Navy program, there's an Air Force program. Shoot, there might even be a Coast Guard program. I don't know. Mm-hmm. There's an IDARF, the Mars German, Antarctic German program. There are other countries that have their own programs. There are certain families that have their own technologies, whether they have their own space fleet or not. That's up to an individual debate. But I would tell you that, yes, they have a lot of advanced technologies. If you've got enough money and warehouse, then you can get into and buy yourself, I guess, some of that technology. There's a lot of them. And anybody that would say that they know who is in every single one, my feelings on that are that that's impossible. There's no way to know that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good answer. Appreciate that. We're going to switch gears a little bit back to credibility, because I just saw more in chat. So I hope this isn't too destabilizing for you. I apologize. Just kind of the nature of the beast. Ever have any problems with alcohol?
No.
Okay. Ever have any problems with illegal drugs?
Nope.
Okay. Ever have a brain injury where you've lost consciousness for more than 15 seconds?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I am scrolling down. I think even the most even-keeled skeptic that has made it through it to this level in the stream would probably ask the question right about now, the evidence question, right? The proof question. On my channel, when we do Freedom of Information Act requests about various different government programs and kind of secret things that we're trying to just get declassified, the big thing is, okay, well, these are stories, and stories are great and they're very entertaining, but where's the evidence, right?
I wish I had the smoking gun, the piece of paper that has all the information that shows the signatures. I suspect that a lot of that information we will not be able to obtain until we have full disclosure.
Do you think that's going to happen, full disclosure?
Yes, I have that belief. Now, the question is when.
Right. Okay.
I do believe that it will happen. Now, to get back to your question of evidence,
Yeah.
there are a couple of lines that you and I had discussed previously that I think are a possible information. Again, it's just another puzzle piece. It's another piece of the puzzle to try and collect, because the compartmentalization is so complete that you may go into a top clearance level organization all the way up to the top and look at all their files, and you will still not have the whole picture.
Yeah.
Because there's another organization over here that also has their own collection of classified files that details everything that's going on. And so asking questions and looking at, what's occurring and what's happening, looking at, okay, for instance, recently I had learned that the U.S. Navy has placed an order for 6 icebreakers. Do we have any Arctic operations going on right now?
And why would they want those? Why would they want those?
That's a great question. They claim it's to keep an eye on the Chinese policies in the Arctic. Well, they could do that with 1 or 2 and satellites. Why do they need 6? There were only 2 icebreakers with Operation High Jump in 1947, 2 for that entire fleet. And so now they're ordering 6. Why is the U.S. military suddenly very interested in underground training and cold ops training? Again, these are questions.
Now, DARPA is running their underground challenge in, I think it's November.
Yes.
On the DARPA YouTube page, the underground challenge in urban, suburban, and rural natural cave systems. You got me.
Exactly. It's asking the questions. Yeah. And until we can see something and hold it in our hands, or see and looking back on the past and say, oh, okay, I understand now why they did that. That's part of the puzzle process. It's part of putting it together. But asking the questions is what's important. Taking the different straws from the wind and putting them together.
And I need to be very careful in how I ask this because of things that we've spoken about before, but this is still on the evidence point. Do you have enough memory recall that if you were to open up Google Earth, you might be able to find a place where you were at some point during your time in that program?
That's a great question. And I've done exactly that in trying to find the places. I have not yet, but there's a lot of ground to cover. So.
Sure is. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. This is a great question. We're going back to the Gaia thing for a second. Do you know David Wilcock? Have you ever spoken with David Wilcock?
We, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I have met him twice.
Yeah.
At the same time, I met Corey. And,
okay, he was with Corey.
Yeah, they were both there for filming Cosmic Disclosure, and so I had a chance to say hello, and that was about it.
Okay. Apologies for the repeat. We have some folks that are
No,
just
that's
joining
okay.
us. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Ask away.
Okay.
Hey, you gotta encourage questions, because as soon as you start discouraging people from asking questions, they're not going to come back and ask them from you. They're not going to come back and ask them here. They're going to go elsewhere.
You got
And
it.
the whole point is that to ask and seek, and not to criticize and to try and shame somebody into not coming out with their story, telling them you need to forget what it is that you've remembered and go away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So have people suggested that to you?
No, they haven't.
Good.
I would have some very specific things to say if they did, but no,
Oh,
they haven't.
well, I would too. I would have some things to say about that too. And if that does happen, we will have a lot of very specific things to say about that. So just know that if need be, the community here, just from an experiencer standpoint, I'm sure that they would be wanting to get in touch with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
And there are a lot of resources, and I think that that's one of the areas that that I was searching for myself, was looking for answers in the process of my own recollection and my own remembering, and it can be a very traumatic process because of the things that you remember, that you re-experience, and going through those things. If you don't have a network of support, whether it's family or friends or a professional therapist or a doctor, um, please don't try and do it by yourself. Have that network that you can rely on, because that is, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion, one of the things that's been extremely helpful for me.
Good.
Is to have that.
Yeah. And one thing is, I was thinking about work with folks that have post-traumatic stress disorder, and it can be traumatizing for a rape victim, for example, to just tell the story and then be told, well, get over it. You don't say that, and so there has to be a trusting relationship set up, not because people are trying to hide things, but because they're trying to insulate themselves. We have a technical question. How did people in IDARP that you were involved with handle keeping the human body adjusted to a different planet's resonance, since there's no alleged Schumann frequency? Is there anything to that, or is that nothing that you've experienced? Schumann
It,
resonance.
it's my personal belief that planetary bodies are a consciousness. They have a consciousness of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Earth has its own, and each planetary body, whether it's a sun or a gas giant or just a rock, they have their own level of consciousness that's far beyond anything I could ever even try to explain, much less understand. And you know what? Some mysteries are okay. It just is. So the Schumann resonance equivalent on another planet is there, and it's not going to be off by much because of the standard blueprint of the human shape, form, whatever you want to call it. The biological processes for different life forms, for instance, an insectoid or some type of primarily water, or whether there's, I haven't seen any avian type aliens that are going through the evolutionary process.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that the resonances for each of those different types of biologicals are going to be slightly different, because of the inherent differences that exist between a standard human blueprint versus another one. Tony had an experience with a rat-like species, or a rodent-like species. I'm not sure if that's the right term, and Tony, please excuse me if I'm butchering that, but the Schumann resonance on that planet is probably going to be a little different than what we've experienced here. My own experience is that the Schumann resonance is enough of a difference if you can tune into it to see and notice the differences between here and Mars. that you can see and notice the difference. And most people would probably, unless they really focused on and trained for picking that up, would probably not notice.
Okay. That's good. That's good to know. I know that you have a hard stop coming up, so I want to be very respectful of that as well as the time you've already given us.
Oh, sure.
Maybe we could shift back to community trademark SSP stuff.
Yes. Yeah, let's do.
Did you respond to the Corey Good legal threat letter on the secret space program trademark?
Yeah, I put it on the internet.
Mm-hmm. That was the response.
That was my response.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything further that you want to say at this point, just now that you're on video and other people are watching you and they're not going to read your document, which I thought was a very well-crafted letter?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. It was it took 2 weeks to write, put together. I did a lot of prayer and meditation about it, and trying to avoid judgment, because that's not my place and not anything that I want to be involved with. My only responsibility is how I act and the way that I conduct my service to others. Mm-hmm. And so anything else that I want to say has to do with abandon the trademark application. One of the topics that has to do with this is that I'm starting to hear that there are already experiencers that are hesitant or reconsidering coming out and talking about their experiences because of this. Because of the legal letter, because of the legal ramifications. If somebody owns a particular phrase or abbreviation, how hard is it going to be for you to get interviews with people? What's it going to do to the community as far as seeking information if they're always looking over their shoulder and wondering, oh gosh, when am I going to get slapped with some legal court hearing or a legal injunction to prevent me from going about pursuing my passion? How hard is it going to be for you to get an interview with people if this is something that stands?
Right. It's kind of that golden rule.
Very much so.
We have some more questions here. Were you married in the secret space program?
No.
Okay. And this comes from Jesse Singer. Big shout out to UFO Not Radio, Jesse. Go Jesse. Can Jason point to anyone that you've worked with to corroborate background, NASA, or anything, in addition to the documents that you'll be producing in the DD-214 you've already given me? Do you have anybody you can point to there?
Yes, there are a number of people that can corroborate that. I will not be doing that publicly because those people will be hounded from here to Tuesday.
Okay.
But yeah, there are.
Okay. And let me just scroll on here a little bit more. What percentage of people do you think have actually had service in the covert space program, secret space program, or even just with IDARF? I mean, how many total people since beginning to end do you suspect have been involved with this?
You know, that's a really good question. And in fact, I have not put effort into putting those numbers together, but being a number junkie, that's it's tickling an interest of mine. So I can tell you that there are about 25,000 Earth humans that are in IDARF. That's split among 2 divisions, and that's just IDARF, thousands, and then you figure out that it's been going on since the late 30s.
Since the late 30s.
It's the late 30s.
Okay.
From the German secret space program before they went breakaway.
I think that that's a perfect transition to the next question, which is about anti-gravity.
Sure.
So obviously the big problem in any kind of space program, whether it's covert or not, is traveling distances staying off planet, getting off planet, and using different propulsion methods. So one thing, and I think this was actually in a video that I did, kind of off the cuff regarding your story when it first came out, which was basically like, why are we always getting these intuitive empaths? Why can't we get somebody who's like, fixing the ships and or mopping the halls or whatever, What's going on with the anti-gravity? Is it going to be suppressed, you think? Is that what they're really using? Are they using other propulsion methods?
There are a number of propulsion methods
Okay.
when it comes to interstellar travel. To answer your question, let me ask you this question. If you had an anti-gravity car sitting in your driveway, that meant you could go anywhere in our solar system that you wanted to. What kind of issues can you see coming up because of that? A lot.
Well, a lot, yeah.
Yeah. So having an infrastructure set up to handle 7.5 billion people using anti-gravity at will, that is part of the challenge that we're going to be faced with. Okay. Not only do you now have the option of living in Nantucket and working in Sydney, Australia, every day. Okay, how do we set up those corridors? What are we going to set up for an infrastructure to air traffic control for that? What are we going to do with setting up and establishing, fulfilling the needs of the jobs that people aren't passionate about doing? I mean, some people relish mowing their yard and other people relish painting, but there's inevitably going to be things that we will need to have either a mechanical or an AI system to control. And in fact, AI opens up a whole new other topic that we could go on for a couple of hours.
Oh, I'd love to at some point, but in IDARF, the primary propulsion methods were anti-gravity, and what else as far as the ships were concerned for I believe you called it the second planet, like it wasn't Earth, but it was the second planet.
The recollections that I've had so far are Planet 1. I haven't remembered the name for that one. Planet 2, which I have remembered the name for, which is Calidus 3, and then Planet 3. Those are the 3 planets that I've recalled. And the type of anti-gravity that has been used, I didn't have a need to know.
Okay.
And your question about intuitive empaths being used, if you can imagine an old turn of the century switchboard that had all the different plugs and switches and knobs, each person is born with that ability. It's just a question of whether that switch is turned on or not. And it's my belief that those particular switches can be turned on by the individual. And some people have them or turn them on at a younger age, and some people never do. And that is their individual mission. They may not have wanted to ever have it turned on. My beliefs, again. So from the standpoint of having those people commonly referred to or being used or being utilized in the secret space program, is that it allows a more thorough interaction with others, to include non-Earth humans. And so that, and again, that's just my opinion, because I wasn't in the medical psychology wing of the space program. It has to do with why I believe that they look for bringing those people in. Now, there's an entirely other section or group within the secret space program that are those that have telekinesis, those that have the ability to move to remote view through all kinds of protection and fields, and that have more of the psi abilities. And those specialized, again, switches that have been turned on allow them to do things that would seem fantastic to most people. But there's more than enough evidence of people being able to do that to support the fact that it does exist, and it's not a question of science fiction. Now, those people are specialized specialists that
Right.
work within the secret space program.
Okay.
I was not one of those. It's my understanding that the breakdown of the personality for those assets is incredibly traumatic. I mean, the things that I went through, by comparison, are nothing from what I understand. The things that they had to go through with splitting their personalities as a child, so that, again, there are different aspects of the secret space program. It's not all fluffy teddy bears and unicorns. The people that came up with these things, some of their ideas and ideals are dark.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that they have found that work to train people are not the most healthiest things for people to go through.
Okay. Just finishing up quickly, is IDARF a military branch?
IDARF is a planetary government arrangement with the Germans.
What in the heck does that mean in terms, you know what I mean? In terms of structure? I mean, I'm just kind of imagining right now somebody who has been following this, and after watching and listening to this interview, they're like, I want to sign up. You know, you're right. I want to. Trump came out with the Space Force. So
Yeah.
if you can you unpack that just a little bit, but also being respective? I don't want to run out of time for you.
Sure. What are we looking at on time wise?
Right now, if you had to go at 3:30 Eastern, we've probably got about 7 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, in wrapping it up, then,
Yeah.
IDARF is a military organization from the top down. The way that the Western militaries are arranged is that 05s, lieutenant colonels, and above, 06, which is a full colonel or an Iron Eagle, 1-star generals, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star. All of those superior command positions are only the Mars Germans. Any of the other positions that fill in the ranks under them are both Mars Germans and Earth in the two divisions that we're involved with. It is definitely a military organization. That is a subgroup of the Navy. And
Okay.
the Navy, I admit, I do not know much about the Mars German Navy. It was a completely separate animal. We were not allowed in any other parts of the ship unless we had orders to go there. The consequences of being caught there were too much for most people to even take a risk of trying. So we had areas, we had our land that we stayed in, and the organization of the Mars German Navy was a military organization, and so they also had rank and structure. The SSP, other SSP programs, I would presume, again, because I don't have firsthand experience, that the efficiency of having a rank system exists because that is how they're able to maintain control and classification and compartmentalization.
Okay.
If you had, it doesn't mean that there aren't civilian scientists and other civilians involved. I know that I've run across other Earth civilians, scientists that were out in the deployed areas collecting information and samples and putting together, samples of either its biological life, flora or fauna, or the false flag aliens. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it did. Some of the other repeat questions: does he consider himself a whistleblower, more of a secret space program experiencer? Quick answer on that.
Experiencer,
Yeah.
SSP experiencer, SSP vet.
And Jason Rice is your real name.
That's correct.
Right. And now we're kind of winding down. So I want to go with some lighter, easier questions because you are a wealth of knowledge and information. And I really do appreciate you being able to sit through all this to be able to disclose.
I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Oh yeah, you're welcome back. I mean, I would love to have you back, and I hope that you kind of make the rounds, for other communities as well. I think it would be a real help. Now, let's see about people are asking about aliens, and I'm not sure we're going to have the time to get into that because that's a huge topic.
Can of worms all itself.
Yeah, it's a whole can of worms. Okay, well, we'll just ask some kind of rude questions then. Are you an actor?
No.
Are you lying?
No.
And have you ever worked for an intelligence agency, either public or private?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Those are easy.
Okay, good. All right. Maybe we can close down just in these past couple minutes, circling back to the idea of the SSP TM thing, and really the part that I would like to hit on, and please jump in, Jason.
Sure.
Is the very, very real importance that we have freedom of speech in these alternative communities and the truth-seeking communities, even in the conspiracy theory and ufology communities, that we have freedom of speech. Because if we don't, well, yeah, nobody's going to hear any stories, because in 20 years, everything's going to be trademark TM. And I think it's easy for us to look at somebody like Jason or anybody else, say, oh, well, they don't have any evidence, so they're, something's wrong with them and we're never going to find out anything. We're never going to get disclosure. But if we have a cutoff of the information that we can access, we are definitely not going to have disclosure. It's just like doctors. Doctors have money to privileged databases where they can read full text of the math that Jason was talking about, or the symptoms or the treatment for the symptoms to diagnose different conditions. But we, down in the lay public, down here on the farm, we don't have access to those because most of them cost $40 to $200 a month just to access a database. Mm-hmm. So controlling information is what this whole game is about. It's not about selling koozies, T-shirts, flasks with an emblem on them or anything else. It's about what we can say and what we can't say. And the fact that you are coming on the show and that we've talked and you've made it very clear there are a lot of things that you can't say, to me, I think that that's very telling. Did you want to maybe close the show out, Jason, with your response there?
Things I can't say. It's not that I will not talk about them. It has more to do with the personal integrity from a standpoint of, again, I don't want to provide a new and improved method of people hurting other people. Things that, anything that I can say, I will, but I'm not going to name names. Are there people that I've worked with in the SSP that I've been able to be in touch with in this conventional life? I'm not going to answer that because, again, what if that person doesn't want to wake up, doesn't want to take that red pill? Who am I to say that they need to? That's not my place.
Yeah.
So if I'm not answering it, it's because I definitely do not want anybody ever stepping on my free will. And so if I'm going to ask that, then I need to offer that as well, and in my actions and deeds. And so if there's anything I can answer that don't fall into those categories, I absolutely will. If I don't have an answer but can get it, then I will get it and do everything that I can to. But if I don't know it, I'll tell you. I have no idea.
Awesome. Well, Jason Rice, I really appreciate your time this afternoon, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you and talk to you. And, I'd certainly hope that you'd be willing to come back at some point in the future, when forces converge again and coincidences and synchronicities happen.
Sure.
If you just hang out for me for just a second, we're going to do a quick outro, a quiet outro. And then I just want to talk to you back off air, and we'll get you out. Okay.
Okay.
Right,
hey, I thank everybody for tuning in. And it's about asking questions. I'm sorry there was a lag there.
No worries.
I just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in, and hey, ask questions. That's what is going to get us to the point of full disclosure.
Right on. So listen, folks, you know, when you're confronting the secret space program, make sure you do it with some reason, logic, common sense, and DD-214s. We'll catch you next time. Vigilance for victory. Myself, Jason Rice, on our way out. Take care. Bye. There we go.